Hi there, it's Toby Jones and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the 2019 remasters or the deluxe edition albums of Chris Rea from the period of 1985 to 1991. And there's 5 albums in total that were released during this period and as such were included in the new deluxe editions. And they were Shamrock Diaries, On the Beach, Dancing with Strangers, The Road to Hell and Auberge, which really was Chris Rea's most prolific period as an artist, going on the up from Shamrock Diaries to really when Dance with Strangers came along, just behind Michael Jackson's Bad in the UK album charts, and then The Road to Hell and Auberge continued that. And by no means afterwards we had God's Great Banana Skin after that and Espresso Logic, and they're by no means bad albums, but I think it was inevitably a bit of a step down from Auberge, which unfortunately is inevitable when you hit such a height. We've seen it with other groups and other bands. AC/DC is one I can immediately think of, with their height Back in Black and having a bit of a downward turn with For Those About to Rock. Again, a more than competent album, but not as good as the one that really hit the heights. So I've got 3 of these 5 albums, the deluxe editions, and we'll find out why in a little while. But without any further ado, let's get into the deluxe editions, how they look, and look at those before I talk about the detail about them, and ultimately whether they are worth buying if you're a Chris Rea fan, a mega fan. You know, how much of a fan of Chris Rea do you need to be to consider buying this stuff? So the first one of these is Shamrock Diaries, and I am a bit flued up today, so if there's a few cuts, that's the reason why, coughing and spluttering and all the rest of it. So you can see this album here is the original CD issue. This is the 2019 remaster, which from a cover perspective, this looks a lot better. Obviously, this is aged, but you've got the Chris Rea and Shamrock Diaries in white typeset, and then a bit of an update to the bottom Shamrock on there, obviously, as well, which looks, again, a little bit better. And then the back cover, all the tracks are the same from the original album, but all of the albums include additional recordings. So again, this is the original with a picture of Chris on the back, and this is the remastered deluxe edition with the additional recordings on CD 2. So I'll just very quickly go through the others here. So you've got Dancing with Strangers, again with a new typeface, black rather than red. Not sure how I feel about that, slightly smaller, but I guess a little bit tweaked and looks a little bit better. This has got a very similar back cover, both with the image on the back, but obviously again this one only the single disc and that the double disc. And then finally, Chris Rea's best album in my opinion, and probably his most known, The Road to Hell. So a bit of a change. This is the remaster. This, as you can see, the lettering is a little bit higher on the cover, and you know, a little bit replaced and all the rest of it. And you can see the back cover. This one a lot nicer than the original CD. You know, that's quite bland if you want to get into that sort of nitty-gritty stuff. This with the nice artwork on the back, and then again additional recordings. So the big bonus that you get with these deluxe editions, with them being obviously after the point of time that the album was originally released, is that you get a great booklet with a lot of detail. So I'm going to compare The Road to Hell for this exercise with the original booklet, and immediately, so this is the original booklet for the Road to Hell CD. It's a fold-out booklet with the lyrics for the tracks, and that's about it, which, in fairness, is, I guess, more than sufficient for an album like this. But the remastered one is a lot thicker, and I've read through this. It gives the original album and the additional recordings, and then a roughly sort of 4 or 5 page spread all about the album. So it talks about the camaraderie between his band and what happened before this with the release of New Light Through Old Windows, on about the famous story about The Road to Hell, some of the singles, some of the art working on it, obviously, which was from New Light, and then The Road to Hell Part 1 and 2. And then That's What They Always Say, the remix, and Texas as well. So that was written by Peter Dodgett in January 2019. So there's that. Nice double page spread of the artwork that does feature on this, but only on a single page. And then, similar to the original CD, all the lyrics for all the tracks, and then the band, and then all the detail behind that. So it is an expanded edition, even with the booklets, which is nice to read. It's not massive, but it is a nice feature. The reason I've only got 3 of these 5 is actually I bought a job lot of Chris Rea CDs fairly recently. I'd got most of this period, so Shamrock Diaries, etc. But there wasn't a lot of the later period I had got, like Dancing Down the Stony Road from 2002, and some of the later 90s albums. I got a couple of them I picked up from charity shops, but not too many of them. And if you can get something in a job lot and it was fairly cheap, it seemed the best way to go. And this job lot included copies of all 3 albums, along with duplicates, which I thought at the time, well, why is that? And those were actually the 2019 remasters. So I think I paid something like £30 for 15 CDs, so £2 each. What you would actually pay for one of these deluxe editions new is about £12. So the question is really, is it all worth it? Now, 3 of these and Auberge on the Beach both feature the original albums, so similar to this, my original CD version. Interestingly, on the Beach and Dancing with Strangers and Auberge to an extent, the original CD pressings of the 80s featured a couple of bonus tracks. So track 11 to 13, Freeway, Bless Them All and Crack That Mould, were all effectively bonus tracks on the CD. They weren't on the vinyl at the time. On the deluxe editions, they've gone back to the original vinyl versions of the album, if you like. So you can see on Dancing with Strangers, there's only 11 tracks on the remaster, but on the original we had the additional 3 tracks of, I think that looks okay, I Don't Care Anymore, Donahue's Broken Wheel, is it, and Danielle's Breakfast. 2 of those are instrumentals, so not really essential stuff as such. And we'll come back to the essential part of it in a minute. So that's an interesting thing about the remastered, that they retain the vinyl version, and I'm okay with that. I don't mind that at all. And then Auberge, the CD from 1991. I know this because I've got the vinyl. You can see there's even a sticker on the front of this Auberge CD that says Special Edition, includes the single Winter Song. All of those tracks, Winter Song, the 3 from Dancing with Strangers and the 3 from On the Beach, are all featured on the second CDs of the respective CDs. So what can you expect on the CDs and the additional content? So you've got the original album, obviously. On the second CD, on Shamrock Diaries, we've got a couple of B-sides. So you've got Dancing Shoes, Every Time It Rains, which were B-sides of singles from this album. Can't remember exactly which ones they were. We've got a saxophone mix of Stainsby Girls, a couple of tracks from a special mini-album that was released at the time, Sunrise and When She Smiles and September Blue, a single version of Josephine, 2 tracks from the New Light Through Old Windows album, and I'll talk through my annoyance with that in a little while, and then the 3 essential tracks here, which are the main point of me for these additional recordings, are 3 live tracks. So you've got Shamrock Diaries, the title track, live from the Montreux Jazz Festival in 1986, and then One Golden Rule and Midnight Blue live at Hammersmith Odeon, May 1986. I'm just going to have to look at the screen. So on the Beach, we've got, again, a couple of B-sides, the 3 tracks from the original album. So there's 13 tracks on the Beach, a couple of those remixes, etc. A couple of live tracks, so It's All Gone and Steel River, both from Montreux in 1986. And then some remixes as well, so B-sides, re-recordings, remixes, all that sort of stuff. And then a couple of tracks which are previously unreleased material on CD. And then on Auberge, we've got the original track, Winter Song, a couple of remixes again, Josephine from New Light from Old Windows, and then 5 live tracks actually on Auberge, Working on It and The Road to Hell from the NEC in 91, and then Footprints in the Snow, On the Beach and Just Passing Through, all from 1991. So Dancing with Strangers has got on, actually I think it's the largest, yeah it is, the largest track listing on here. So some B-sides, Yes I Do, Sussequoy, I'm Taking the Day Out, the 3 tracks from the original album, some extended mixes and remixes, which I'm not going to touch on too much, a couple of tracks from the Christmas EP, and 1 live track, disappointingly, only 1 live track from the album, which is Loving You Again. What a great single that wasn't successful that was on that. So this is probably the one with the least value, I'd say, on the second side. And then The Road to Hell, similar to Auberge, it's got quite a few live cuts. There's 1, 2, 3, I think there's 4 live cuts. The Road to Hell and Working on It again, but live at Wembley Arena this time in 1990. Let's Dance, also live at Wembley, and Daytona at the NEC in 91. And then annoyingly on this album, you've got 4 tracks, all from the album New Light Through Old Windows, which, if you're not aware, is a compilation of re-recordings, mostly re-recordings that Chris Rea did in the late 80s. So, the sad geek that I am, because I was quite annoyed with the placing of tracks, and I'll move on to that in a little while, of the tracks on the additional recordings. So, there's 71 tracks all in all on the additional recordings on the 5 albums. 13 of those are B-sides, so that's decent value, I think, stuff that you wouldn't get on the album. 18 of those are remixes, so longer editions, extended editions, different mixes. For me, I'm not too bothered about those. 8 of those tracks are unreleased material on CD or previously released on CD a long time ago on an EP. So you've got the first edition of Driving Home for Christmas and a couple of the tracks from the Christmas EP, etc, etc. So that's 11%, 8 tracks. Another 8 tracks were from New Light From Old Windows, which we don't need because there's a compilation album already called New Light From Old Windows. Just seems like a bit of filler, that stuff does. But there's only 8 tracks out of the 70 odd, so I'll forgive that maybe. 16 of the tracks are live tracks, which is 23% of the content, and I'm all for that. That doesn't actually seem right, 16 tracks. That doesn't seem right to me. That seems too many. Because I have on iTunes... No, they are all live, in fairness. Okay, there's 16 live tracks. That's more than I thought there was, because what I've done on my iTunes, I'd originally imported all the free CDs I'd got onto iTunes, but there wasn't really that much value in the rest of the stuff. What I was interested in was the live stuff, and I guess some of the B-sides, but none of the B-sides really struck me as anything brilliant, so the live tracks have gone on there. So, how many was that? 16 live tracks, and then, again, a couple of tracks from EPs as well. And then 7 of the tracks originally from the CD album. So the non-value perspective of this for me, really, is about 46%. Your stuff remixes, New Light From Old Windows tracks in the original album, so 46%. What irks me a little bit with these as well, and it's a little bit difficult because some of them are live cuts from later on, is, for example, on The Road to Hell, we have the live cuts on here are working on it, which I can accept. That was a single released on New Light From Old Windows, so I can accept that. Let's Dance, which was from Dancing With Strangers. Would that maybe have been better on Dancing With Strangers? Maybe. I'm going a little bit against my point because I like to see... So there's 3 tracks in a row here, all from the same live recording or same time. So that's a positive in itself, but not on the album, so that's a bit annoying. Daytona was on this album. Again, Let's Dance is on here from New Light From Old Windows. Surely that would have been better on Dancing With Strangers. And working on it, and I Can Hear Your Heartbeat from New Light Through Old Windows as well. It just creates that little bit of a disconnect between the time and the album and everything else that goes with it, which irks me a little bit, I guess. Shamrock Diaries is probably the best of these, probably because it's the first album, ironically, in this set, because a lot of these tracks are from the time. But again, do we need the 3 tracks that are the re-recordings for New Light Through Old Windows? I guess they're decent as references to look against the original selections, but again, I'm not too sure about those. And then Dancing With Strangers is not really a lot of value, to be quite honest. We've got I Can Hear Your Heartbeat, the extended mix, which, alright, was on New Light Through Old Windows, but that was originally featured on Water Sign back in 83, so a bit of a disconnect there. We've got the single of On The Beach from Summer 88. Again, fair enough, because it's at that time, but surely just put that on the Beach's additional recordings. I know I'm being petty here, but it is annoying. And then Josephine, a French recording of that, again, put that on Shamrock Diaries. It is a little bit frustrating, to be fair. We've got a couple of repeats, like on Auberge. Alright, they're different live recordings, working on it in The Road to Hell, both from the NEC in 91. But it feels like the stuff's almost, right, we'll find 70 odd tracks and just chuck them in. There doesn't seem to be much thought about the placing of them. Again, we've got Josephine from New Light From Old Windows on Auberge, which was 4 albums later. It just isn't quite right. And I know this seems ridiculous, probably, and maybe petty, possibly. But maybe what I would have preferred from this is go and remaster the original albums. Do that. I'm fine with that. Put the additional recordings on. So maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7 an album. And then do an additional album, maybe even on one of these. Just have one of these as the additional material, or have a 3rd disc, which is a live album. Because that's really what I wanted to see. There's There's 16 tracks here which could constitute a mishmashed live album because they're all from different periods. But the user's got to do that. I've got to go onto my iTunes and organise the stuff myself. I would like to have seen a live album from this point, because the only live album that's available, of course, is The Road to Hell and Back, which I haven't actually listened to that, but that's a later album. There's plenty of stuff out there, I'm sure, in the vaults. There's plenty of live recordings, so it would be great to get live at Montreux in 1986, live at the NEC 91, live at Wembley 1990. They've picked certain bits, and maybe this is a project that Magnet are looking at in the future, I don't know, to bring out live albums of Chris Rea, or even whether there's the demand for that sort of thing. But that's what I'd like to see, because that is completely different content to what we've seen before. B-sides are nice, but we've already got those. The live albums are very much in the vaults, and for somebody like me who didn't like to get to see Chris in his prime, live albums are one way to really revisit and see that from my own perspective. One box set that this has done really well, that I haven't indulged too much in yet, and I got this in the same job lot of Chris Rea albums, is actually the first era of Chris Rea, which is Era 1, 1978 to 1984, A's, B's and Rarities. And what's rather good about this is that it's pretty much, barring a couple of hiccups, but for understandable reasons, pretty much in chronological order, which pleases me greatly. And I'm just going to feature this very quickly, because I don't think I'm going to do a separate video on this before I come to the sound of the remasters and all the rest of it and the ultimate verdicts, whether they're worth buying. There's a great booklet in this that has got all of the original singles for the A-sides, and even later on for some of the rarities you can see here with track 11 and 12, even some of the white labels that come along with it. So that's quite cool, and the times when they were released, so you can track that back. So I think that's a really good purchase, value for money, as a free disc set. Picked that up for about £10, I think. I was actually going to sell this before I realised that the track from Chris Rea's newest album, One Fine Day, are all included in the start of CD2, which was tracks that were recorded in the early 80s but not ever released. So Chris Rea released those as a limited release. So what's the verdict on these albums? I've talked a hell of a lot about placings of stuff and all that stuff, and maybe that might be something that seems a little bit petty, possibly, and that could be right. Maybe that could be right, but if you are paying 12, 13, 14, 15 pound for a deluxe edition, it just feels like some of that thought should be involved. Ultimately, any of the original CDs you could go and buy for £1, £2, £3, £4, £5 maximum. And the question is, does the bonus content, because that's really what you're looking for. For me, I'm not an audiophile as such. I can't say, wow, there's a terrific difference between the original version of Shamrock Diaries and the remastered edition of Shamrock Diaries. Sure, there's going to be some subtle differences, but from my listening here, it doesn't sound all that different. So you're not buying it for that. You're buying it for a couple of reasons. Firstly, if you haven't got the album at first, so you're looking to buy that album and you think, well, because it's got the bonus content, I might as well buy that as well. Secondly, you're a die-hard Chris Rea fan, or you're a big Chris Rea fan. Maybe die-hard's too much of a dramatic word to use. And you're looking for the bonus content. And I guess that second one is me, even though I came across these albums unintentionally. And as I say, where my disappointment lies is I would like to see more live stuff. But maybe other people are into different things. And the third reason is, I guess, that you want an upgrade on the original CD. Well, if you're person 3, unless you are also person 2, who's a big Chris Rea fan, I don't really see the point. There's subtle differences, and as I've said before, the covers look quite nice and all the rest of it. But I don't know whether it's worth... And I mean, I probably come from a school of thought where I pay £1 for 5 CDs from the charity shop, so I'm a tight bugger. But nevertheless, it does seem a little bit steep for paying for something that you can get for quite cheap, and then with this deluxe content, what I'm trying to say here is that the deluxe content on CD2, the additional recordings, don't really muster up that elevated price to buy the new CDs. In fairness, when I've looked on Amazon, because nobody else has done a video to my recollection of reviewing these 2019 remasters, all the reviews on there are quite good, and I've come across person 3 who wants to upgrade their CD. I've come across person 2 who was quite happy with the additional recording, so maybe it's just a personal thing. And who was person 1? I can't remember who person 1 was now. I know person 2 was the die-hard Chris Rea fan. Person 3 was the person who wants to upgrade their CD, and I can't remember who person 1 was. It escaped me. Oh well. Maybe person 1 was me, and he's irritated. But it's great, nevertheless, to hear these great albums again. I want to bring my album reviews back on the channel, because I haven't done those for a long time, my deep dive album reviews, and really look into these, because particularly this album and Auberge, the bottom of the pile, so I'm not going to pay myself in getting that from there. Particularly Road to Hell and Auberge are fantastic albums. I'd also like to talk about some of Chris Rea's early releases, which maybe could themselves garner a remaster, but maybe there's not the demand for those, but who knows? Because those would be nice to get a remaster of the likes of Wide to the Moon, Water Sign, Tennis, Deltix, and Whatever Happened to Benny Santini. It'd be nice to get some of those, but clearly they're focused on these. I haven't heard of any news of any more remasters for now. Before I die from this flu, I'm going to wrap it up there. So, as I say, I'd like to do some more Chris Rea content on the channel. This is my first video on Chris Rea, so if you're a Chris Rea fan, let me know down in the comments. Thank you for your company today. What do you think of these box sets? More importantly, make sure to subscribe if you are new around here. Comment your thoughts as well, and leave a like on the video. It all helps the YouTube algorithm help find my channel, which ultimately will bring out more content, and hopefully you'll be able to find some of the old content on the channel as well. I've been Toby Jones. Thank you for your company today. I really appreciate you sitting along for the ride and listening to me whinging on about track placings on an additional recordings album. But these are the kind of things that get to me. But anyway, thank you for your company, and I'll see you all in the next video of mine. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.